people from your hometown, indeed from the area of your hometown, turning their backs on Labour and voting BNP?
I think they feel like the Labour Party's lost touch with its traditional kind of heartlands and core support, and the financial crisis has obviously caused a lot of unemployment, and so the British jobs for British workers kind of thing is gaining increasing, more and more ground.
Because that was Gordon Brown's attempt. That was a Labour slogan.
Well, this is the problem, is that both Brown and Cameron both pay kind of lip service to the British jobs for British workers kind of movement, so they're almost using the same rhetoric as the BNP.
As the BNP.
Which is...
But it's not sticking for them, whereas it is for the BNP.
There was a great article in The Independent this week where they were basically arguing that because Brown and Cameron both talk in this way, it almost legitimises the thing that like Nick Griffin
Which was always the danger.
Of course.
It was the collapse in the Labour vote that got us 2 BNP members, but the BNP vote went up. I was looking at the figures and went up from 800,000 to 950,000 compared to 2004, at a time when the overall vote of everybody was declining. Almost 1 million people in this country voted BNP.
Yeah, and 1.3 million voted Green, and the Green vote was up by nearly twice as much in percentage terms as the BNP vote was up. And what we're talking ourselves into is hysteria over the BNP. I mean, I don't think anything happened this week. The problem with the BNP vote is the electoral system, the absolutely mad electoral system that allows you to get MEPs when you've got 8% of the vote. You see, in the northwest seat, it's this huge region. You've got 8 seats. Well, of course, if you've got 8 seats, you're going to win with 8%.
But even the Greens doing well as part of the process that John's talking about. It is that the old working class vote moved to the BNP or didn't vote at all, and a more liberal middle class vote, disillusioned with Labour and the Tories, voted Green.
Yeah, but the media decide what the story is. I mean, it is true that the Labour Party vote collapsed, not very surprising. I think it went down by nearly 7 percentage points. But actually, 2.5 percentage points of that went to the Greens, but for some reason nobody wanted to write about this time. 1.2% or something like that went to the BNP. I mean, this is substantially a non-story. It is not surprising to me that the BNP got a few more votes in the middle of a recession. But what they got, due to the daft system, is 2 seats, and that's what's gained the headlines.
Yeah, but am I missing something? I mean, this country has never elected anything like the BNP to a parliament before. This time we did.
Do you know, I agree with Michael about the electoral system, but I don't think it's a complete non-story. I would say, though, the pattern is different in the north and from the south. Disaffected white working class people in Hackney do not vote BNP. And one of the quirks of fascist voters is, if you're in a genuinely multicultural community where people live next door to black people, go out with them and whatever, like in London, you're not frightened of black people. It's where you live in communities where the ethnic thing is relatively recent and you're frightened, that's when you go to the BNP. So in inner London, it isn't an issue. But broadly, I was just saying, I agree with your analysis of what's happened.
I want to bring John back in here. I mean, we've always had poor areas, and there's always been a Labour inclined working class that every so often feels a Labour government has let it down. But in the past, it hasn't voted BNP.
What's different this time is that all these people who would kind of, by nature, just vote Labour always are turning their back on Labour. And like I said in the report, there's no way that they would ever vote Conservative. You know, there's people who would rather walk over hot coals than ever vote for the Conservatives owing to the history.
Yeah, it seems that they go to something much more right-wing.
Well, of course, that's the thing. But for me as well, I think that the media needs to own a little bit of this as well, because, you know, Blair came to power on the back of saying he wanted a media monopolies bill, completely backed down, allowed... kind of, you know, the Daily Mail ran a headline last year saying Fagan's heirs about Romanian pickpockets in London. You know, the fear. One person got charged with possessing a stolen mobile phone, but the headline is there, and it's in the minds of these people all the time.
But if you're going to talk about the media, we're at it right now. We've started this programme by talking about the BNP. There were many more interesting things that happened the other day. And I'm sorry to bore on about the electoral system, but to understand what's happened, you have to understand the electoral system. In the northeast of England, a lot of people voted BNP too. But for gerrymandering reasons, the northeast of England has 3 seats in its region. So to get elected in the northeast of England, you need about 20% of the vote. To get elected in the northwest of England, you only need 8% of the vote. This is a stupid system.
1 million people voted BNP, Michael. We've had this electoral system for a long...
not a million. Stop.
Well, 950,000.
950,000.
Well, it's near enough, 1 million.
And
it's historically unprecedented. We've never elected the far right like this to a parliament, even in the 1930s.
Because we've never had a daft parliament
At the
like
height of
this.
fascism,
We've never
we
had
never
such a
did.
stupid electoral system as this. In
All right,
the old
well, we'll
days,
agree to disagree.
we used to have first past the post,
That-
and then you didn't
yeah,
get
but
people
we've
like
never
this.
had first past the post in the European elections.
Well, we did actually to begin with, but we don't have it now. We have a silly system which allows extremists to get
all right.
elected.
In your view, it's all the voting system. Diane, I think in what John is saying, in a sense, the underlying message he's saying is that Labour has failed its core working class vote.
I said earlier, I agree with your analysis. The working class...
You agree with that?
I agree with the analysis. In your analysis, the working class feel that Labour Party used to talk for them and now talks at them. There's also a collapse of underlying social structures. The trade union movement, which I know you deplore, trade union, though, was a transmission belt which got working class people into politics and, educated hundreds of thousands of working class people about politics, meetings, resolutions, that politics was a participatory process. With the collapse of trade unions, that notion of participating in politics and understanding of politics has gone.
Are a lot of these million that voted, is there a racist element to their vote? Or are they voting for the BNP for other reasons, even though they might think it is racist?
I think the BNP are tapping into an underlying current of
racism.
Kind of, yeah, but often it's kind of soft racism or casual racism, where people feel free to make racist remarks. But to actively, this is what worries me, and we can badger on about the electoral system all we want. I mean, if 1 million people actively go and vote at a time when people aren't really that bothered about voting, that's when it's time to worry, because they're getting in the car, going to a place and putting their preference on
and
a
it
slip.
is frightening. I mean, historically, you have a recession, you see a rise in fascism.
You see, some people, Michael, have said, well, the media talked the BNP up, they gave them too much publicity. But I would suggest to you the real people that talked them up was the Labour Party. The Labour Party tried to scare a lot of people by the possibility of a big BNP vote to try and stop it from happening. And when they did that, the media then had to cover it.
I don't think we tried to scare people. We know the figures, and we know actually...
Is your name Michael?
Well, we're quite similar. Whereas UKIP...
You're not at all similar.
UKIP...
Almost impossible to tell apart.
Almost impossible to tell apart. UKIP are disaffected Tory voters in a European election, but the BNP are Labour voters.
Okay.